evening.
I cannot see the page.
On behalf of the Las Trampas Creek Council of PTAs and the League of Women Voters of the Diablo Valley, I would like to extend a warm welcome to everyone in attendance this evening and to those of you that watch this at home at a later date. My name is Lisa McConnell, and I'm a resident of Walnut Creek, where my children attend public schools. I volunteer as president of Las Trampas Creek Council of PTAs, and that's something we all share in common here today. We, each and every one of us, are volunteering our time to be here tonight. The candidates have volunteered to run for these positions, and our League of Women Voters do this out of the goodness of their hearts and their hope to continue the democratic system in this country. We care deeply about this community, and that's why we're here. And so I thank you for giving the gift of your time tonight to engage in this meaningful and respectful way. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Janet Hoy. Janet currently serves as the co-vice president of the League of Women Voters of the Diablo Valley. She's been involved with the League for 10 years, working in education and advocacy, primarily focused on elections, but also getting involved in local issues both in North Carolina and California. Janet's professional background was in the health insurance industry, working for insurance companies in a variety of regional roles, and also with a large integrated hospital system in San Diego. So Janet, thank you for being here tonight. Take it away.
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me in the back? Good? Yay. Sometimes I do this, etc. So if I need to move up closer, please let me know. Ditto for the candidates when they are speaking tonight. Thank you so much for being here. What a fabulous crowd we have. This shows how engaged you are in your school district and the impact your schools have on the kids. So congratulations to all of you for being here. Thank you so much. Oops, hang on. So, as Lisa said, I am the moderator tonight. Thank you for coming. This forum is co-sponsored by the Las Trampas Creek Council of PTAs, Acalanes, Campo Lindo, Miramonte High School Parents Clubs, and the Las Lomas High School PTSA. I'm going to pause for a moment here and give you the 30-second commercial on the League for those of you who don't know about us. The League is over a 100-year organization. We've been around for 100 years. We came when women first got the vote. Yahoo! Many years ago. Woo, woo, woo! And we are decidedly, forever, in the past and in the future, nonpartisan. And what that means is we never take positions on candidates or parties. We do, though, take positions on issues. And we help people make informed decisions during elections. And I don't know how many of you got your ballots today, but I got my mail-in ballot today. They were mailed on Monday. Woo, woo, woo. So we're getting ready for the election. In addition, we have a big role, the League has a big role of educating voters and our community about issues of interest. So we are here tonight with our educational hats on to help moderate this forum. This is a 1.5-hour forum for the office of board member of the Acalanes Union High School District Governing Board. There are 3 open seats, and as you can see here, there are 6 candidates. There was a 7th, but he did not respond to our request for participation here. And the candidates are, in alphabetical order, Jennifer Chen. Nancy can... Maybe we should hold the applause to the end. It's going to be kind of a long evening. Yeah. Nancy Kenzerski, Gabe Ledeen, Renee Nowak, Mark Woolway, and Chris Severson. I didn't have it in alphabetical order there either, did I? Walnut Creek TV is filming this event, which will be posted on the League's YouTube channel and later broadcast on the City of Walnut Creek's Government Access channel. And if you want, we have a listing here of when you might be on TV. They pan the crowd. You could be on there too, yay. So they're going to show this particular forum a number of times. Let's see. We ask that audience members not record the audio or the video so as not to have misleading partial segments of our program. And we also ask that you please silence your cell phones, because that can be disruptive. In addition, I should have asked this before, but in addition, I want to ask you in advance not to cheer or applaud any statements. It is disruptive and takes time away from the candidates. I, as moderator, have made the decisions about speaking order for both the opening and closing statements, and they are in alphabetical order for the opening, reverse alphabetical order for the close, and at a random order for each of the questions. So we don't want to give anybody the advantage of having the first word or the last word. It's all in random order. We have 2 timers down here in the front. Speakers will see a yellow card with a 15-second warning. And then when their time is up, they will see a red card. 90 seconds open and close, 1 minute to answer the questions. We will now proceed with the 90-second opening statements, and that will be in alphabetical order, starting with Jennifer.
Thank you so much for everybody who made this possible. I'm Jennifer, and I'm a working parent of 2 teens, one who went through Campo and one who will be at Campo next year. I'm also a clinical social worker, which means I'm professionally trained as a creator of positive change and community collaboration. Like many here, I moved here with my family because of the great schools. My approach centers on the student experience. I've engaged with our students and their parents, I've studied our data, and during the pandemic, I gathered with a bunch of talented other parents to make positive change at Campo. I know our district and its strong legacy of high performance, and as a parent of teens who have gone through the pandemic learning, I know how to lead us productively forward. It's critical to pay attention to our students and their experiences in order to steer them successfully through into a complex and challenging global world. My priorities are academic excellence. Our schools remain top ranking, and academic excellence means providing every student, regardless of who they are, the opportunity to access success. And secondly, fiscal responsibility. We need to continue our legacy of spending our funds wisely and strategically. Thirdly, well-being for our students. Academic excellence can only happen if our students are feeling safe, supported, and sense of belonging. My professional experience in fiscal planning and public education and my knowledge of adolescent development make me uniquely qualified for this job. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jennifer. Nancy.
Thank you. Just a little about me. My professional background is computer science research. I'm a Moraga resident. My husband and I have 2 sons who attended public schools and graduated from Campo Lindo High School. I remain an active school volunteer through PTA and the Moraga Education Foundation. It's been my privilege to serve on the board of AUHSD since 2013. The district was excellent when I joined the board and has remained excellent to this day, but that doesn't mean that nothing has changed over the years. Far from it. Excellence is not maintained by standing still. New ideas, continuous improvements are an essential part of education. And during my time on the board, new initiatives have included block schedules, academy periods, wellness centers, new science standards, new graduation requirements, enhanced college and career readiness, review of homework practices, and examination of grading practices, and that's just to name a few. My top priority is to support the district's student-centered culture and strong academic focus and performance through continuously strengthening and enhancing, expanding our curriculum, and improving the conditions of learning so that every student has their opportunity to excel and grow. I wish that could be done in an environment where the sky's the limit, but we must work within the constraints of a fiscally prudent and carefully managed budget, and thankfully, with the immensely valuable support of our local communities and the invaluable expertise and partnership of our certificated and classified staff and administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Gabe.
Hi, good evening. I'm Gabe Ledeen, and I'm thrilled to be here with you tonight. I live in Walnut Creek with my wife and 3 children. We moved here from San Francisco, where we lived for almost 10 years, and we've loved the quality of life, from the warmth of our neighbors to the vibrant downtown and the seemingly endless array of family-friendly activities. I've been inspired to run for this position by the urgent need for leadership in service of our students and their families, and a strong belief that I can make a positive difference for this community. Service is important to me. I joined the Marine Corps after 9/11 and served 4 years as an officer, including 2 tours in Iraq. I received a world-class leadership training, and I put it to use every day, leading Marines through complex and chaotic situations. After the Marine Corps, I attended Stanford Law School, clerked for a federal judge, and entered private practice in technology and data privacy law. In my personal and professional life, I have been fortunate to have close, lasting relationships with people across the political and ideological spectrum. This has been a defining feature of my adult life, in fact, and has helped me to see issues from different perspectives and always from a position of curiosity and respect. I mention this because I think it is an essential quality for a nonpartisan, non-political governance role, especially in the area of education. My priorities: 1, repair. These last 2 years have been fracturing, and there is a lot to do to repair the damage, from rebuilding broken trust to remediating lost learning. 2, excel at the basics: budgets, teacher support, facilities, community engagement. 3, individual achievement and a learning culture. Every student in our district belongs here and should feel respected and supported, whether they need extra assistance or more opportunities to excel. I care deeply about preparing students.
Thank you, Gabe. I think your time is up, but thank you.
Thank you.
Renee?
Hi, my name is Renee Nowak. I live in Moraga, and I have 2 kids in our public schools, one in elementary and one in middle school. I have a long career as a workplace investigator, so I specialize in investigating sensitive employee matters such as harassment and discrimination. As an investigator, I have to consider all sides and anticipate future outcomes of recommendations I make. I am direct and I ask the tough questions. I have strong analytical and critical thinking skills, which I use to find new ways to address problems. My priority is to strive for the best academic education for each student with their own unique needs. If your kid is like one of mine and needs extra help due to a learning disability, or they are recovering from learning loss from the last several years. We also need to provide the appropriate paths for kids that place in advanced math and science to be competitive in their college application process, and emphasize support for those going into trade schools, so that all of our kids' needs are met at whatever level they are. Another priority is funding for the learning needs of those with economic challenges or ESL students, and offering parent support, offering free or low-cost tutoring. There's a multitude of ideas. Another priority is also to parents, to make sure all families that want to be are involved, that they are heard, and they are represented by the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Chris?
So I deeply believe in public education. I attended K-12 schools locally and just recently enjoyed a 30th class year reunion of Miramani High School. I have 4 children that are graduates of our schools. They attended Miramani, Camp Lindo, and Acalanes at different times. And I have another child that's going to be a future AUHSD graduate. The reason I've served for 8 years on school boards is that I believe that all children deserve the kind of education which will accelerate the upward trajectory in their lives. I work as an emergency medicine physician, and it's under-recognized that my specialty is highly involved in illness and injury prevention. We want less customers. I have brought that reliance on science and wellness to the board, and that's never been more needed than the last few years. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Mark?
Hi, my name is Mark Woolway. I live in Lafayette. I've lived here for about 10 years. I have 4 kids in the Lafayette public school system, a 7th grader at Stanley, a 5th grader, 2nd grader, and kindergartner at Happy Valley. I've been very active in the community in my kids' schools, also as head coach of several youth sports teams every year. Career-wise, I've spent my career in tech. Last 22 years, I've been an executive and investor in high-growth companies, spending a lot of time in corporate boardrooms and dealing with corporate budgets. I want to run for a UHSD school board because I want to make the schools the best that they can be, for my kids, for your kids, for the community at large. I also think that it's time for new leadership on the school board. This was brought to light for me during COVID. when, in my opinion, the current board kept kids out of school far longer than necessary and really did a disservice to our students. If I'm elected, my top 3 priorities would be, number 1, first and foremost, improve the academic performance of our schools. Our schools are good but can be a lot better. Secondly, improve transparency and parent involvement, which I think has been a little bit deficient. And then third, bring responsible budget planning and maximizing the ROI on our budget to the process.
Thank you very much, Mark. So that concludes the opening statements. We're moving into questions now. And all of the questions after this next one are directed to all of the candidates equally. And we're doing it at random, so everyone gets their opportunity to ask it. We did, though, as you know, ask for questions in advance. And we got a lot of them. And I can see they're stacking up on the table here, too. You guys have lots of questions. And there was a question that came up numerous times that doesn't affect all 6 of the candidates here. And I wanted to ask it. And I'm asking it with the permission of all 6 candidates. And Mark is going to respond to it on behalf of Renee, Mark, and Gabe. And the question is, why did you choose to run a joint campaign? And if you win, how would this translate into your leadership and governance style?
It's a good question. So first of all, Renee, Gabe, and I met through mutual friends and soon realized that as parents we shared some common goals for our schools. And we decided to campaign together because as busy working parents, there's a lot involved in these local elections. And it just made sense to share resources and really not reinvent the wheel. Do want to clarify that this is not a slate. We're not running as a slate. You can vote for, one, some, none, or all of us. And to the question about how it would impact governance on the board, I think that, we're all very different people. We have different priorities. We agree on certain things and disagree on certain things. So, I think that if that is a concern for any voters, I'd actually encourage you to look at the current board's voting record, and I think you'd see that they vote in lockstep a lot more than I think we would.
Okay, thank you, Mark. We're moving into the formal question and answer. The candidates have 60 seconds to answer questions. And we're doing this in random order. And the first person that goes for this question goes to Gabe. And the question is, what in your experience makes you particularly well qualified to serve on the Akalana School Board?
Right, thank you. So, as I mentioned earlier, I have extensive experience in leadership, world-class training, world-class unique experience. I think leadership is fundamental to a board position. Beyond my leadership experience, my current job as a chief privacy officer for a startup, essentially what I do is I go into an organization and I learn it from the ground up. It can be an area that I've never worked in before, and I meet with key stakeholders. I understand the way the company functions. I identify deficiencies. I set key goals. I plan with stakeholders. I bring in people from different backgrounds and experiences, expertise, and we work together to develop and implement a complex plan that respects individuals and protects them. So that's essentially, in my view, a core skill set that's lacking from the current board, both on the leadership side and on the professional development side. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabe. Next, Chris.
So I've served on school boards for 8 years. School boards are different than other jobs that people might have. It's different than serving on city or even executive boards. There's a lot to do, and there's a lot to know about how school boards operate. And that experience that I have, I think will make me qualified for the board. I mean, I've done the job, so I'm not sure, what else to say. Other than I have a real job as well, and my real job is working as an emergency room physician. And again, that's all about wellness. It's all about prevention. It's all about reacting to the needs of people. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And for any candidate, you're welcome not to take the full 60 seconds if you don't need to, just so you know. Thank you. Jennifer.
Hi, I'm a parent of teens that I have insight into how the schools work as a parent of teens. I have fiscal responsibilities for my own business that I've grown and have managed complex organizations and fiscal tight budgets. And I know youth and mental health, and I am a developmental expert. And I am also an expert in how to implement DEI and SEL learning, and have done many trainings for organizations and hired as a consultant to do such things. My temperament, I think, is very suited to the board. I'm collaborative, I'm proactive. My first step is to listen. I'm a professional listener. And I feel that that is essential for a board of 5 people to get important work done for our students. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Renee.
So I went into my experience a little bit, my work experience, which I think is very relevant in my opening. I've spent a lot of time listening to board meetings and talking to parents in the district. And I have a great sense of what parents' needs are and what their kids' needs are. My kids will soon be entering the district. I think that that is highly relevant because I have a stake in what is going on now and really what can be improved. We have great schools. We have great teachers. I have ideas that will improve on what we already have. I'm also a mom. I've gone through the IEP process with my daughter. As I mentioned, she has a learning disability. So I have a lot of experience and feedback to give around that subject as well.
Thank you, Renee. Nancy.
Thanks. I also am currently on the board, so I have a number of years of experience, actually 9. I do think that knowledge and experience is an extremely important asset. It's a valuable asset. I think that a range of experience is useful on a board, so I think that mine is valuable. Schools, I also have a significant experience and knowledge in legislation and school funding, which is dramatically different than budgets and funding in normal sort of corporate businesses, which I also had experience in from being a department manager in computer at HP Labs. It's a very different world, and it requires a lot of sort of new learning because you don't control the majority of your revenues, and you don't control a lot of the spending that you have to do. So I think that the experience is probably the strongest. Thanks.
Thank you, Nancy. And Mark.
Well, I think first and foremost, I'm probably most incentivized to make the schools as good as they can be, considering I have 4 kids coming up through the system, which I think is more than anybody else. So, so I got that. Yeah, as I said earlier, I have 22 years of experience as an executive and investor in corporate boardrooms. I know what well-functioning boards look like and what sort of not so well-functioning boards look like. And I think there's a lot that can be improved here. I think in terms of transparency, we can do a lot better in terms of actually taking accountability and ownership for problems. We can do better. And then third, we can also do a better job with the budget. The current board is projecting 3 years of budget deficits. And, with my extensive experience running sort of finance for billion-dollar companies, I think we can do a lot to improve upon that.
Thank you, Mark. Question number 2. If you are elected to the board, what programs or initiatives would you want the district to prioritize or pursue? And we're going to start with Nancy.
Thanks. From my perspective, I want to essentially continue some of the efforts that we have started in terms of expanding the curriculum to make sure that it is inclusive and to make sure that we are concentrating on the learning environment that we provide, because a student learns best when they are supported and have the environment that allows them to learn and not be distracted by other things. I think that is work that we've been doing in multiple different facets, and I'd like to see that continue. So that's my priority.
Thank you, Nancy. Jennifer?
Thank you. I've been able to visit all 4 comprehensive high schools, and I've had the privilege of learning about so many amazing work being done in all the campuses, and I plan on seeing ACIS and adult ed programs as well. So there are many things I would love to support. I want to just highlight a few. That we have a bridging program from 8th to 9th grade that I think is very critical, especially in supporting the students in that transition, especially supporting those students in the wake of COVID. Part of the nature of having a separate high school to our K through 8 is we really need to work collaboratively with those districts. Other ones are definitely supporting the special ed programs and the DEI efforts, as well as our English language learning programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Mark?
As I said before, our schools are good, but I think they can be a lot better. And one of the things that I'd want to do is improve college preparedness for all of our students. Now, understanding that college is not the end-all and be-all for every student, but I think for most students in the district, they are trying to get into a good college, and I think we can do a lot better in terms of preparing them for the application process. Not every family in the district can afford private college counselors, so I think the schools can do a lot more with academy time and even after school in terms of preparedness for the testing and application process. Secondly, I think we can also do a lot better in terms of the special needs programs at the schools, making special needs students feel more included and more a sense of belonging, increase the number of aids available to special needs students. It's a cause that's near and dear to my heart. My partner has a special needs student in 8th grade at Stanley who'll be entering Acalanes next year.
Thank you, Mark. Renee?
My priorities would be, for programs, would be special education, tutoring and parent services for students that cannot afford that. I think that there's a lot of, like I mentioned before, a lot of kids recovering from learning loss over the last several years, and they just need more help, my kids included. And I would say that those are probably my top ones.
Thank you, Renee. Gabe?
Thank you. A lot of great options already discussed here. It's difficult to come later in the list, but the focus for me is on impact. I think we should, especially in these sort of coming lean years where we're facing financial challenges, we need to really focus on impact. Where will we best serve students who need it the most? And I think that really ought to be data-driven. My sense is that there are a population of students who are not currently being served to the best of our capabilities, that we could emphasize programs for English learners, for example, students who are new to the community, who are adapting, and of course special needs students, as have been mentioned by other candidates. Emphasizing those programs, developing them, really focusing on data-driven decision-making as well as culture, I think is where we can get the most impact.
Thank you, Gabe. And Chris?
Yeah, so my priorities would be a superior public education. That means continuing with our career and college readiness, maintaining outstanding staff, closing achievement gaps. Second, student wellness. We have our student wellness centers. We can continue to expand that work there. We've been revising homework and grading policies. Student safety and belonging is also important. And finally, fiscal stewardship. We have reserves. We need to maintain those without increasing the tax burden on the citizenry. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Question number 3, and I think some of you have answered this as part of other questions, so you can just answer it briefly again and then answer the second part. Question is, how many children do you have or have you had in an Acalanes district school? And how long have you lived in the district? We're going to start with Renee.
I do not have any kids in the high school district currently, and I have lived here for 7 years.
Chris.
I was trying to do some quick math in my head. I think I've lived in this school district for 37 years. I was gone for schooling for a while, but was drawn back. I have 4 students that are graduates of our schools. Like I said, they've covered 3 of the different high schools that we have, Acalanes, Miramar, and Campo Lindo. And I have a 7th grader who will be joining the ranks of the AUHSD in a couple of years.
Thank you. Gabe.
I have 3 children. I've been very fortunate in that respect. I have a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old who just had a birthday, and a 5-month-old, so excuse the circles under my eyes. So a 6-year-old is the one who's in public school at the moment at Tice Creek. We have a long way to go, but I have, as Mark mentioned earlier, all the incentive in the world to ensure that our high schools are extremely high functioning. And as I've said to some people who've asked me that question, it would be odd, I think, to tell someone that they need to wait for their child to be in the school before they can take action to try and improve the schools.
Thank you, Gabe. Nancy.
I have 2 children who went through all our public schools and graduated from Campo Lindo High School, and I've lived in the area for 27 years. We moved here just before my kids started school.
Thank you, Nancy. Jennifer.
As I mentioned, we moved here for the great schools, and I have an 18-year-old who has gone through Campo, and I have an 8th grader at JM who is going in next year, and we have lived in the area for 4.5 years.
Thank you. And Mark.
Yeah, so as I said before, I think barring any sort of future childbirths, I have the most children who are going to be coming up through here with the 4 kids, oldest being in 7th grade. So, he's going to be next year facing the decision of where he's going to be going to high school. And then I'll have 3 others after that. So again, I have, I think, the most vested interest in doing whatever I can to make the schools as good as they can be here. We moved out here from San Francisco about 10 years ago.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Okay, question number 4. And this one will be kicked up by Mark. You're not going last this time. What volunteer activities have you been involved in the Acalanes School District or in one of its feeder schools?
Sure. So in addition to just volunteering in my kids' classes, which I've done a fair amount, as I said in my opening remarks, I've been a very active youth coach for many years in many different teams in different sports. It's something that takes up a lot of my time, takes up, currently during football season, at least probably, 8 or 10 hours a week, which is a lot, in conjunction with my job and this election and raising 4 kids separately. So, but I love it because, it teaches me a lot about the kids, and I love leading the kids, and, it makes me realize that these kids are awesome and they deserve better than they're, I think, currently getting.
Thank you. And Gabe.
Sure. I'm currently a volunteer soccer coach for my daughter's U7 soccer team. I'm relatively new, so just getting started with my volunteer activities. Very excited to be here. This is kicking off my volunteer activities. So thank you.
And since we have a couple seconds, I'm not sure you answered the question of how long you've lived here. If you would answer that, that'd be great.
Sure, yeah. I've lived in Walnut Creek for 1.5 years after living in San Francisco for 10 years.
Thank you. Chris.
So it's no surprise to anyone that being on the school board is a volunteer job. There are some huge school districts that they get paid for the job, but this is not one of them. So I volunteered for 8 years in school districts. The other thing I was involved in most before the school board, my wife and I volunteered with our elementary school, the Glorieta Elementary School, helping to run the auction there, so helping to gather revenues for the schools, which are very needed. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Renee.
So I'm a working mom. My involvement at the school level has been that of a typical parent, volunteering in classes and events at school. I've become more focused on schools in recent years, and I've been attending board meetings, finding out what they're all about. I've been talking with a lot of parents and decided that this is a time that I can step up, devote more time. I have a lot to offer as far as my background and my education, and I have a different perspective of a typical parent on the board.
Thank you, Renee. Jennifer?
Hi, so I've done a lot of volunteering in both the Moraga and Acalanes School District, and one of the first things I did was to volunteer at the College and Career Center with Joan and see all the poor students that were stressing about their applications. And I also joined the DEI Campo Committee with parents, and I was the lead on the curriculum aspect of looking at our curriculum in our schools. And I worked alongside students and teachers and just saw the amazing work that they did together. I was the only parent that participated in the initial restorative justice training alongside students, staff, and administrators. I was also co-lead on an affinity group for AAPI parents to focus on SEL learning and how to support our students' mental health. I also participated in a parent interview committee for the JM principal. So that's just a few things I've done. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Nancy?
So I have volunteered, as Dr. Severson mentioned, a number of years volunteering as a member of the school board, but volunteered as in my kids' classrooms in various ways. I've been a member of PTA in my kids' schools and after, so I'm a past PTA president, past PTA treasurer, past PTA financial secretary. I'm currently auditor. I am the financial secretary for the Moraga Education Foundation. I'm a past VP of Education and Legislation from 32nd District PTA. I am the past co-chair of a parcel tax for the Moraga School District and past treasurer for the parcel tax for the Acalanes District. So I have worked with every one of our partner districts plus Acalanes Union High School as a volunteer. And I guess I'm also vice chair of the La Miranda school bus program.
No kidding, huh? Focus on the volunteer and all of that, too. Volunteer position, wow. Okay, thank you, Nancy. Question number 5, and we'll kick this one off with Chris. What individuals or organizations outside the district have donated to your campaign? Oh, that got an audience reaction, huh? Ooh.
Yes, so I won't take the full 30 seconds. I have not accepted donations for this campaign.
Thank you, Chris. Gabe?
I believe that information is publicly available. I don't have a list in front of me. And
Do you want to just, I think what the group might be interested in is just the larger donations, perhaps? If you could list 2 or 3, that might answer their question?
I mean, I guess I don't understand. That information is publicly available. I didn't come prepared with a list of donors. If you want me to name individuals.
It's okay, guys. Shh, let him answer. Let him answer. Are you done?
That's the answer.
Yes. Sorry, no clapping. I probably encouraged the clapping at one point, but no clapping. Thank you. Thank you, Gabe. Nancy?
I also have accepted no campaign donations of any kind.
Thank you. Jennifer?
I have accepted campaign donations. I have a handful of friends outside the district that have given a relatively small amount.
Thank you, Jennifer. Mark?
Well, so first of all, it's pretty easy for an incumbent to say they haven't accepted donations because incumbents generally don't need to campaign. So in terms of who's donated to the campaign, as far as I know, it's a bunch of friends and family. I have a lot of friends and a lot of family, and they've donated. I think the same is true of Gabe, and the same is true of Renee. Friends both in the area and out of the area. good friends of mine that I grew up with in Los Angeles, high school friends. My mom donated. She's in LA. Who else? I believe that the crowd said, did Virginia Thomas donate? And I did see that in the campaign finance. I think she donated $250. So if there's some question about,
No clapping, guys, come on.
so $250 doesn't go very far these days.
Thank
So,
you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Renee?
I have not looked at it. I have no idea what kind of donations that have come in. I will say that I have had somebody tell me that there was a $25,000 gift donation given to us, and we have absolutely no idea. I mean, everything's public. I would like to address that is complete misinformation. That I'm not sure where that came from, but if somebody gave us a donation of $25,000, we're still looking for it. So,
No clapping, please. Okay, thank you. Please, no clapping and no yelling out from the audience. It's disrespectful to me, it's disrespectful to our candidates, and we want to keep moving on. Two quick things. Someone's asked a question about what is SEL and DEI, and I will just define them to the best of my ability. SEL is special education learning. I hope I have that right.
Social emotional learning.
Sorry. Okay, thank you. Social emotional learning. DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. Well, there was no B there, so I didn't include the belonging. Okay. Okay, question number 6. And we're going to start this one with Jennifer. Are you familiar with the district's 2021 to 2024 Local Control and Accountability Plan? If yes, can you describe one or more of its goals and how their achievement meets the responsibilities of the district?
I've looked at the LCAP, and I have to say that there's a lot in there, and the school financing is very complicated. What I do know is that I've been to many board meetings and listened to the board members. I've listened to the staff in the districts, and I am astounded at their competency and their wisdom and their ability to take very complicated pieces of information and put them together for the benefit of our students. I don't remember specifically a component of the LCAP in this moment, but I have it in my computer. But I do want everybody to know that I am competent to work alongside the board, to hold accountability, to work with our very competent staff to make sure that our schools are protected and sustainable for our future.
Thank you, Jennifer. And if any of the candidates want me to repeat a question at some point, I'm happy to repeat it.
Could you please?
Okay, I'll repeat it right now then. How about that? And next is Nancy. Are you familiar with the district's 2021 to 2024 Local Control and Accountability Plan? If yes, can you describe one or more of its goals and how their achievement meets the responsibilities of the district?
Yes, I am familiar with the LCAP and various goals, but the one I would like to highlight is to have and retain a superior, excellent workforce. I've mentioned before that I'm interested in making sure that our curriculum is inclusive and expansive, and the conditions for learning are great. We can't have excellent schools without excellent teachers, without incredible staff, and that is an important part of our district to encourage the kind of partnership and working together that builds the trust that allows us to be a destination district, to retain staff, to train staff, and to have staff that is so good that they leave us and take superintendent positions at our other local partner districts.
Thank you, Nancy. Mark?
Yes, I am familiar with the LCAP plan, and I do think a lot of the goals are definitely in line with the district's objectives. Jennifer mentioned that, she's sat on board meetings and seen how competent the board is at budget planning. Well, what concerns me is that the board itself has stated that they're projecting a 3-year budget deficit, meaning to deficit spend for each of the next 3 years. And Chris mentioned the reserves. Well, the reserves are projected to fall basically in half, from 15% to 8%, which is underneath the board's current target of 10% reserves. So I'm not terribly sure how that's competent financial planning. So the other thing that I would actually look at doing in terms of budgeting, and Nancy mentioned teachers, try to see if we can funnel more money towards teachers. Teachers are our most important asset, and less towards outside consultants.
Thank you, Mark. Chris?
So the LCAP is a plan that is a 3-year plan. Probably about 10 years ago, the state moved to this LCAP plan, which is local control, that's the LC, and accountability plan. There's parts that we need to do for sure per the state, and then there's parts that we can locally decide what our goals might be. We collaborate with all stakeholders when we develop these plans, particularly parents and also our staff as well. So one part of that LCAP goal is closing achievement gaps. We have achievement gaps for our ESL students, our people of color, our special education students, and we have a plan that is in place to work to close those gaps. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Gabe?
Yeah, thank you very much. I have read the LCAP. I don't have a summary of specific goals in mind to hear tonight. The ones that have been mentioned were ones that definitely stood out to me, in particular one Chris just mentioned. It's been a focus of mine, as I mentioned in earlier remarks. And I think one of the difficult things for me is when you dive in to get a real clear sense of exactly how we're measuring these discrepancies or gaps that we're trying to close, and how closely aligned our priorities and our spending priorities are to actually closing those gaps. So for me, that'd be a definite priority and emphasis for me. As I mentioned earlier, focusing on impact means finding ways, looking at the areas where we move the needle a lot, even with a small amount of change. Thanks.
Thank you, Gabe. Renee?
I am not very familiar with that name, that acronym. I do know it as the budget, and I am familiar with looking at the budget numbers. I know that we are facing a large deficit that has gone into our reserves. It is projected to continue for several years. I would approach this by asking questions about what the goals of each programs are. Have we measured how our programs are working? Surveyed parents, students? Have we reduced or increased what we are looking to do? And are we ultimately getting the results that we should?
Thank you, Renee.
Can I
Question?
use my 1-minute rebuttal?
We don't have rebuttals because we have so many candidates.
Oh, okay.
Question number 7. How would you advise the district on meeting the estimated $3.5 million shortfall in the FY 22 to 23 district budget? I think, Mark, you touched on this, and you're first to answer this one.
Sure. So as someone else mentioned earlier, for better or for worse, revenues are fixed, meaning the budget has only so much to spend. So a lot of it just comes to finding ways to reduce costs. And to me, a couple of the most glaring ones would be administrative overhead expenses, which are, in my opinion, way too high a percentage of the budget. Again, teachers should command more of the budget than they currently do, and I think that would come at the expense of administrative overhead costs and also outside consultants, which, in my opinion, are comprise an outsized portion of the budget.
Thank you, Mark. Jennifer?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. How would you advise the district on meeting the estimated $3.5 million shortfall in the fiscal year 22 to 23 district budget?
I'm not aware necessarily of that shortfall, but what comes to my mind is that What I've known from going to the board meetings is that we have very competent staff. We have Julie Bautista, who's a whiz and an amazing enrollment crystal ball reader and estimator of what things arise on the horizon. And what I do know is that we have also made a commitment for a 10% reserve, and we are a fiscally conservative board, which we should be. I do believe that we need to work continually with our ed foundations, our communities, and that there are also one-time grants available through the California for different initiatives. I know that the federal government had just released a large sum of money for mental health care, for example. So we need to be creative and collaborative. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Chris?
So there's so much to say here. So we're actually in a very strong financial position, and then we have the reserves that we need. Are we beholden to state finances and changing state priorities? Yes. Are we beholden to local property tax growth? Yes. That 3.2 reference number deficit does not take into account any future increases in LCFF, which is the state way they fund schools. It also does not take into account any future growth in local property taxes. And again, I could go on with the lack of depth of school finances that Mark has indicated, but I'm out of time, so thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Nancy?
So the deficit referenced in the question is from a budget report, which is not the most recent. The most recent is actually showing a surplus. And the reason that I'm mentioning this is because, education finance is tricky, and it results from the fact that the revenues that you're getting are a combination of ongoing funding and one-time funding, and the funding is changes as the legislature works on passing the budget, and the difference between the two budgets, one which was reported at June and one which was reported in August, is that we got the final word on the one-time funding, which we were expecting, but they had to work out the details. It's a very complicated funding system. It is why I have spent years advocating to the legislature to improve the base level funding for schools, which is ongoing funding that we can count on. We managed to get a win in the budget, which didn't help our district as much because we were community funded, but is a win for our local districts.
Thank you, Nancy. Gabe?
Thank you. I think some of the answers, are indicative of the issue for me, which is that in order to solve a problem, you have to understand a problem. And answers that it's very complicated. Oh, that report showed a deficit. This report shows a surplus. I think to me means it's virtually impossible for members of the public, even regardless of how engaged and interested you are in the topic, to understand the current finance situation, which is unacceptable to me. I think it's a fundamental responsibility of the board to take complicated information like this and digest it and synthesize it and make sure that it's available, accessible, and understandable to the public, which I don't think is happening at the moment. So I think, to me, the starting point is understanding and then communication to the community and make sure that people understand exactly what our current financial situation is so that they can plan for themselves. Residents need to know, should they be anticipating increases in taxes, or should they be anticipating additional requests for donations in order to pay teachers? They have to have this information, and the board has to be proactive.
Thank you, Gabe. Renee?
I'm going to use the same example that Gabe used. I think that it's very concerning that that the information is so hard to find. A lot of information that we've been looking through is embedded in agendas for board meetings. One of the things that I would definitely prioritize is making it so that it is very easy to find. There's three of us working on this. Finance is his career, and unless you have some sort of I guess as a board member, you would have really know what the latest information is, but I think that that's definitely something that every parent should have too.
Thank you, Renee. And you're first up on this question. Do you support the district's approach to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? Please explain your position.
Yes. I absolutely support diversity and inclusion for all students. It's a core value of mine, and I know that it is extremely important to our community. I want all students to be treated with respect. I would expect thorough investigations and consequences for bullying, harassment, or discrimination. Despite what some might think, I am not here to dismantle DEIB initiatives. What I do want to make sure is what we have in place is working, it's effective. That kids from all races, kids in special ed, LGBTQ kids are actually feeling that they are part of the school community. And that every kid from every racial group feels he or she is part of the solution of bringing people together and not part of the problem.
Thank you, Renee. Jennifer.
Yeah, so when I was volunteering with the Campo D&I committee, we did a 2-year study which 90% of the students had participated in. And that gave us 2 years of data, and we understood a lot of important things. And one of the things I really wanted to understand is what are our students actually experiencing on each campus? And 75% had been experiencing bullying, and 50% did not feel a sense of belonging in 2021. There's a lot of very talented people. Lene McFadder-Harris is heading up some very important relationship-based and complex conversation-based initiatives to really shift our ability to come together and connect despite differences of opinions, different orientations. And this will benefit our LGBTQ plus students, our special ed students, our students of different racial backgrounds. And really from there, that's where we're going to bolster the excellence in our education. It's foundational. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Gabe.
Look, this is really important, hard work. I've done a lot of reading and listening, and it's clear to me that a lot of time, effort, and energy has been put into these programs here, in particular over the last 2 or 3 years. My wife and I have been involved in efforts in our own workplaces, and in fact, she co-leads the program at her architecture firm in San Francisco. I do also have some personal experience. First, I'm Jewish. I'm keenly aware of anti-Semitism in the Bay Area, including in this community, increasingly of late. In fact, my own last name represents accommodations made to discrimination. The name was Levine when my ancestors came over, and it was changed to Ledeen in response to anti-Jewish hatred. My wife is Japanese American, and her family was forcibly relocated into internment camps during World War II, even as 2 of the brothers were fought and died in the U.S. Army. My sister-in-law is a professor, author of a book on Asian American activism, and is very engaged in a variety of DEI-related activism efforts. I say all this not as qualifications, but so you can know who you're talking to instead of making assumptions.
Thank you, Gabe. Time is up. Thank you. Nancy?
Could you repeat the question just so I make sure that context? Sorry.
Yes. Do you support the district's approach to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? Please explain your position.
Thank you. Sorry, it's just, it's broad. I do support the approach because I'm on the board, and so I've worked to try to put that approach in place. But it is, absolutely, it's important. I think that we just started to really sort of scratch the surface. It's not an easy, it's not an easy thing to solve quickly because you need to basically reach out, and people need to be educated, but they also need to internalize it so that they can then sort of incorporate it into various aspects of their life. And that's why we're working to address it in multiple different ways. And I think it's incredibly important because that is the base for being able to learn. And that's why I think it's incredibly important in schools.
Thank you, Nancy. Mark?
Yes, I absolutely support the district's DIB initiatives, and I think the district's doing a great job in this regard. I think we could, still improve upon some things. I think unpacking those letters a little bit more. Diversity is very important for kids to be exposed to all different backgrounds, races, genders, socioeconomic backgrounds, everything, because that sort of exposure will help kids immeasurably in life. But I think one thing that is sometimes overlooked is diversity of thought and viewpoints, which I think can be fostered and encouraged, and something that I think sometimes is ignored. In terms of I and B, inclusion and belonging, one thing that I'd like to see a little bit more effort focused on is special needs students, as I mentioned earlier, topic near and dear to my heart. I think we can do a lot better in terms of getting them feeling more included. Inclusion and belonging, it's sort of table stakes, because if kids don't feel included and feel like they belong, they're not gonna succeed.
Thank you, Mark. And Chris?
Yeah, we know that students are more engaged in their learning and more successful when they have an increased sense of belonging. And people are at their best selves when they feel included and have a sense of belonging. And groups that value diversity and equity are more successful. One initiative that we've introduced in the last few years in the district is something called Grading for Equity. It emphasizes the shift for the students from collecting points to mastery of material. It's about grading and assessing students on what they do inside the classroom, not based on their lives outside the classroom. It's about giving every student second chances, third chances, and more to learn. It's about giving every student hope. And we've engaged in this effort, and it's been already returning some big dividends. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Next question was sent to us via email, and it's from a Stanley Middle School student. And the question is, what will you do to protect the rights of LGBTQ teens and ensure that schools promote a safe and equitable learning environment? And this goes to Nancy first.
Sort of a companion question. Obviously, it is to make sure that we work hard to have a culture that is accepting of our students, whoever they are. We do have, not just for LGBTQ, but for all various groups that are traditionally marginalized. We have a lot of clubs on campus and groups on campus that allow you to essentially find students alike students. We foster not just those clubs, but foster the ability for those groups to collaborate across schools and to sort of build a larger community, to make connections to outside groups, and then through our wellness centers, it's just an incredible resource for any student who needs to reach out and make connections.
Thank you, Nancy. Jennifer.
Thank you. I appreciate the question. It's really important. It's really important because our suicide rates for youth are very high, and they've always been high for teens that are LGBTQ. And this is something we really need to pay attention to, because we know that when students are not seen, respected, and heard in who they are and their identity, that it can cost their lives. We need to protect these teens. We need to help them feel safe. We need to create environments on campus where they have access to bathrooms, where their pronouns are respected, where they are normalized as people and given the designation of humanity that we all deserve, and not treated as other. And so we also want to create clubs and connections, and my hope in part of the bridging program from 8th and 9th grade is that we will have some connections for the mentors of the older students at the high schools to really welcome the 8th graders coming in. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Mark?
I think this is a very important topic, and I think we touched on it in the last question. But I think that the district's doing a very good job in this regard, but again, I think we can do better. I think what I'd like to do is speak to a lot of the LGBTQ youth and figure out what programs are working and double down on those, because it is a very important topic. And again, I think the current board is doing very well in this regard, but we can probably do a little bit better.
Thank you, Mark. Renee?
I would essentially, I think I've already touched on this question in my DEIB one, but again, I really want to make sure that all kids are feeling that they are a part of the community, free from harassment, bullying. I think that we have excellent programs that are inclusive of these students. And I think that I've pretty much already covered everything.
Thank you, Renee. Gabe?
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo the comments of the other candidates that I do think the district is doing an excellent job in this respect. I think it's clearly a priority. It's clearly been an emphasis that resources have been directed to this. I mean, I would dare say you could put this district up against any other district on this particular issue, and I think this district would come out looking very, very good. So in that respect, what I would do is to continue to support the programs that the district's already put in place, but to look carefully at what's going on. If after all those investments and efforts and specialized programs, if there's still a significant problem here where students don't feel safe, they don't feel they belong, I definitely think it really warrants very close scrutiny and understanding of the reasons why, because it seems as though it ought to have been improving. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabe. And Chris?
Yeah, so it's fitting that this question came from a student because our students are very interested in this topic and in all of our DEIB work. Sorry, that faded out for a second. We have our DEIB lessons that are teacher-led, but we have very heavy student involvement in those. I think one thing that we can continue to shift towards is continuing to get that dialogue going between the students. It's one thing to have teachers and students interacting one-on-one, interacting from teacher to student, but having students collaborate together on a lot of these issues is where really some good work happens and some, again, big effort in belonging and inclusion. So thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, question number 11, and Mark, you'll answer this one first. Do you agree with recent legislation in other states that bans or limits topics addressed in history and literature classes, such as gender identity, racism, and feminism? Please explain.
I am familiar with those laws, and no, I absolutely do not agree with them. And I think that we're fortunate to live in a state like California where such laws would realistically never be passed. And I hope that we continue with that. I don't think that banning just about anything is good for education. I think that those topics in particular need to be addressed and really need to be fostered. So no, I do not agree with that at all.
Thank you, Mark. Chris?
Yeah, I disagree with banning those things. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Renee?
I disagree as well.
Okay, zipping right along. Jennifer?
I disagree with banning books. I really believe that we can trust our students in this global world, being exposed to as much as they're exposed to teach them analytical learning and thinking, and teach them how to find their own voice and understand and digest and integrate the materials that they're having contact with. I respect librarians, and I used to fantasize as a kid being locked in the library because I loved it so much. So all the books, please. Thanks.
Thank you, Jennifer. Nancy?
I disagree, and I would like to echo what Jennifer said about librarians, and not just librarians, but teachers, in terms of bringing in materials that cover all sorts of subjects, because if you cannot access and learn about what you have not come across, then you're not really getting the education that you want. And if some of those things are uncomfortable, that's what stretching is. That's what sort of growing in your education is. And the professionals who work to try to provide the sorts of books in our libraries and in our classrooms, that is part of what they dedicate their lives to.
Thank you, Nancy. And Gabe?
Thanks. I think it's a very important question. So no, I don't support those laws, that legislation, and I would go beyond that to say that, in fact, the practice of keeping materials out of the hands of students, I think, is unethical and counter to the purpose of education. The purpose of education is, in fact, to develop critical thinking skills to enable students as eventual citizens, voting citizens, to think for themselves, to review multiple perspectives, critically analyze them, and form their own views, ideally to be able to communicate those views with others effectively and hear and listen to other people who have different perspectives and be able to take those on board and reevaluate their own beliefs. That's hard. That's very hard work to do. I don't think we do that very well as adults, and if we don't model that for our kids, that'd be very difficult for them to do. We need to have that courage to be able to share with our students multiple myriad positions and perspectives and help them to navigate how to think through those and develop those critical thinking skills. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Gabe. And Gabe, you're up first on this next question.
Right.
The district has committed to hiring diverse staff to better reflect the growing diversity of our student population and our interconnected world. How do you plan to retain and offer systems of support for these teachers and staff?
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredibly important question. I mean, recruiting and retaining excellent teachers is, I think, probably the single most important thing because those teachers are the ones who make the greatest impact on students, and we're here for the students. As was mentioned earlier, it's a student-centered district, which is exactly the right way to do it. So recruiting and retaining skilled, excellent teachers that can connect with students is vital. How to do that is incredibly hard. I don't have a ton of experience working with teachers in that respect. What I would do is get to know their specific issues. I know it's very expensive to live here, especially on a teacher's salary. So addressing those kinds of concerns and giving them comfort that they're going to be taken care of and be able to live here with a high quality of life that the rest of us enjoy is so important. You do not want teachers feeling like second-class citizens in the community in which they teach. Initiatives like the teacher housing in Orinda, I think, is very interesting, something that I have personal experience with. But also just feeling like they belong and that are welcome and appreciated goes so far. And I know that we do that already. I would emphasize that as well.
Thank you, Gabe. Chris?
Yeah, so I think we need to hire the best candidate. That's the kind of the hard stop. What we want to do is increase the pool of candidates that are applying to our schools. With that larger pool, we have a more diverse pool, and then we can choose candidates that, again, is the best candidate, but we're choosing from a much larger pool that has a lot more diversity in it. So the work is making sure we increase that pool and making sure those candidates want to work here in the AUHSD because they're comfortable with the values, with the work, and with who their colleagues are. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Jennifer?
Yeah, I'm really supportive of recruiting diverse staff. I think that what we know by research is that students really benefit by diverse staff, and they benefit from being taught by teachers that represent their identities. I would also want to note that if I am voted into the board, that I would be the only person of color on the board. And I think that that's significant for the large the population of Asians in our community, which are the largest racial category other than Caucasians. I really believe that the teachers are the heart of our school, and they need support. It's not just enough to hire a person of color. They need to be listened to. They need to have other coworkers to collaborate. And from what I understand, that the district is very intentional about creating that space and empowering those staff to be able to team up and move together in support of each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Renee?
I think that to have a diverse teaching staff is very important. I think that with our programs, our diversity programs for our students, that should certainly be more welcoming to our teachers as well. I don't have the answer, to tell you the truth, of what I would do about that, but because I think that overall I work at a company that's even a problem for our corporate company that pays extremely well. So I think that we're all facing that. again, we need to reach out to parents, people in the community, and we need to find creative solutions to this problem.
Thank you, Renee. Nancy?
So it's not a problem with a simple answer. It is a problem with multiple facets. The first thing that we are doing and that we have to do is to, as Dr. Severson mentioned, work incredibly hard to make sure that we get out into a wide set of possible pools for candidates, because what we want to do is attract the best and brightest, and the best and brightest are across all different groups, but it's not necessarily as easy to find as sort of like next door. So first, it's on us to go far and wide and to reach out. Second, it is to try to identify if there are barriers for someone coming and to work on removing those barriers. Whether it's housing or various things, but also to make sure that we are projecting that it's a welcoming place. But there's a teacher shortage, so we're working against a sort of
Thank you.
difficult time.
And Mark?
Well, I'm always last. I love both Chris and Nancy's answers in this regard. I think that expanding the available pool, enabling us to choose the best and brightest within that pool, and by expanding the pool, increasing the diversity of that pool, that's awesome, and that's exactly what we should be doing. So I'm glad to hear that. That's in terms of recruitment. In terms of retention, I think cost of living is a very big issue, and I think what Gabe mentioned about finding creative solutions to that, like what's sort of being proposed in Orinda, is important. And then third, something I've sort of touched on earlier, is that I think it would be helpful if we could try to just make sure we're paying teachers competitively and as much as possible, and to that end, if we can sort of reallocate money away from overhead and consultants and toward teachers, that may help.
Great, thank you, Mark. We're getting close to the end of our time. I'm going to combine two final questions, and then we'll have the closing remarks. First question will go to Renee, and these are combined. Can you explain where the money to fund our schools comes from, and would you support a bond measure during your tenure for capital improvements?
What was the second one?
Would you support a bond measure during your tenure, time you're on the board, for capital improvements?
I still didn't hear the very end part of the second question.
Would you support a bond measure during your tenure for capital improvements? Facility costs and the like.
Okay. So I know that our money comes from the state. I know it comes from property taxes. It comes from things like bonds. I know that it was supposed to come from the lottery as well. I'm not sure how much actually comes from the lottery. And I know that it comes from parents graciously giving money to the school district. To tell you the truth, I don't have enough information on a bond measure. Of course, it sounds like something great to improve our schools, but I would have to know more about it before I could really answer that question. I would look forward to learning more about it.
Thank you, Renee. Jennifer?
As I said, and many others have said, our funding for schools is a complicated, constantly moving entity, and it comes from a number of things. Definitely the state funding. We have the benefit of passionate educational foundations that really protect our schools and protecting our arts and our athletics and our wellness centers, which I'm incredibly grateful for all the parents and the volunteers to make those things happen. Occasionally, schools will do things like parcel taxes and things like that. My understanding is that the state of the budget is going well enough that we are not looking at such a thing, which is good news. And there are also other areas of revenue for one-time things like money that we got for COVID and money for the ethnic studies program, money for mental health that are possibilities. I do know that our Los Lomos Students got a new science room, which is really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Gabe?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer's been given. In terms of the funding, you can get you can get down to very granular level in talking about per pupil funding and things like that. But those are the basic sources have been described. In terms of the bond question, again, what I said earlier, I think pertains to this question as well. It starts with understanding. It starts with understanding our current budget situation, which, as I said, I think is quite ambiguous. If you're a member of the public, it's very difficult to understand our current financial status. So getting clarity on that and understanding if indeed additional funding measures are required. Bond measures aren't punitive necessarily, right? I mean, there are all kinds of reasons why you want to do it, and there are definitely great outcomes from them. So I don't view bond measure as necessarily a negative or a hardship for the community, but it needs to be done effectively. It needs to respond to a specific need, and the community needs to be bought in and engaged on it.
Thank you, Gabe. Nancy?
So funding for schools is a combination of federal funding, state funding, and local funding. For us, from state funding, we are, because of the progressive and understandably progressive way that the state funds schools, we are the lowest funded high school district in the state, which means that we have to make up the difference, and we make up the difference through local funding, which is a combination of parcel taxes, which are already in place and generate significant revenue, and the contributions from the communities through, typically through education foundations and also through other donations for sports and related sorts of things. We are blessed to have a community that supports us in that way. And as far as a bond issue, we actually still have some bond space in our latest bond, which was from many, many years ago, which would be used before we would go out for another bond issue.
Thank you, Nancy. Mark?
Yeah, as Nancy summarized the sources of funding well. I think declining enrollment is a concern because that obviously affects the funding available to the district. In terms of a bond measure, so first of all, I do think that the facilities need to be upgraded in a big way at all the schools in the district. If it came down to bond or parcel tax, I would prefer bond, but still I do not think it's fiscally prudent to be issuing debt at a time of a budget crisis, which we're in right now. So how do you reconcile that with the need for better facilities? I think that we need to explore ways to get the parents much more involved. I mean, parents contributed a fair amount as it is, but I think parent contributions, voluntary contributions, this is a wealthy community, and I think the parents can do more in terms of upgrading facilities, especially the wealthiest parents.
Thank you, Mark. So that concludes the question portion of our...
You skipped Chris.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Chris. Go ahead, Chris. Thank you. You go for it.
Thanks. So yeah, I wouldn't support a new bond measure because, as Nancy said, we already have bond authorization, so we could sell bonds and generate revenue for that. I think more important than that, we have Julie Batista here in the audience, who's our chief business official for the district, and she is a wizard at finding grant funding from the state for different projects. So when you look at our actual expenditures in the district about what we spend, much of it comes from the state because she's able to find grant funding. So thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Chris. So now all the candidates have answered the final question. Thank you to everyone in the audience for your attention and cooperation. We will now move into a 90-second closing statement from each of our candidates, and we're going to do it in reverse alphabetical order. So Mark, you get to go first.
All right. Well, first of all, I have to say I'm surprised that there was no question about COVID. It obviously was a massive impact the last few years on everyone's lives, and especially our students, who were deprived of, basically a year and a half of their high school years that they'll never get back. And to me, it's a shame. I think there was a leadership failure on the board's part to not bring back the students sooner. The board could have voted in October of 2020 to bring kids back, and they voted 5-0 not to. I think that is something that cannot be overlooked. Yes, COVID is hopefully in the rearview mirror, but I think that sort of decision-making leads me to have less confidence in the board making such decisions in the future. Second thing I want to touch on is school performance. As I've said, our schools are good, but I think they can be better. This is sort of an uncomfortable truth, but there was a recent study came out by Niche, which publishes extremely comprehensive school data and school rankings. And the schools in the AUHSD, the average ranking of them within the Bay Area of public schools is number 20. 20th best public school in the Bay Area is the average ranking. Including private schools, the average ranking is 56th. And, maybe it's not fair to compare public and private schools, but I do think that we want our public schools to be on par with private schools, so I think we can do a lot better. And I urge you all to keep that in mind.
Thank you, Mark. Chris?
I'm grateful for the public education that's been built in Walla Morinda. I'm grateful for Superintendent John Nickerson, the district staff who lead this district in the day-to-day. I'm grateful for our principals who are amazing. I'm grateful for our teachers who help spark the curiosity and care deeply for each of their students. I'm grateful for the classified staff who take pride in keeping our campuses safe and functioning. I'm grateful for our parents and our larger community and for all of you that came here tonight to listen to us chatter, who without their support and engagement, we would not be able to provide much of what we so value in the AUHSD. And finally, I'm grateful for our students who are our learners and exemplify really to all of us what it means to grow oneself both intellectually, emotionally, socially, and athletically. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Renee?
Actually, I think that I've just about covered everything. I'm not in need.
Okay. Gabe?
Thank you. It's been a long night, not the least of, I think, for us up here. I want to say thank you to everybody for participating and engaging. I think our system doesn't work without this kind of engagement. I want to highlight really one point, which is the reason I'm here. I mean, the reason I'm doing this is not because it's fun. It's really not actually any fun at all. I have no aspiration of a political career. Maybe that's evident. I'm really here because I care deeply about students. I care deeply about education. I spent the last couple of years during COVID in a sort of quasi-fractured state because of my inability to provide, help for my own kids, right? Looking at these kids, my friends' kids, kids in the community who were suffering, and I felt like I couldn't do anything about it, and that was extremely difficult for me. And I resolved at that time that I wasn't going to do that again, that when the opportunity arose to do something, to take action, to participate and contribute, that I would take that opportunity. And so despite being a relatively new member of the community here, seeing an opportunity to participate in this process, to present my voice, my ideas, my proposals, some solutions hopefully, and a lot of skills that I think are highly relevant here, I decided to step up and do it. I appreciate the support that I've received from so many people, from parents, from teachers, from a lot of students, from members of the community, and I'm really looking forward to continuing the discussion after this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabe. Nancy?
First, I want to thank the League of Women Voters, the Las Trampas Creek Council of PTAs, and the parent clubs and PTSA of our 4 high schools for hosting this forum. I'd like to thank all of the volunteers who are here helping to make the forum work, including our wonderful moderator. But most of all, I'd like to thank our audience and anybody who comes to watch, but I'd like to thank some of our students who are here or are participating in this process because, this is part of the gloriously messy world of democracy, and it's great to, start young and get involved. As I mentioned earlier, I joined the board in 2013, and my children have graduated. And I do get asked occasionally why I'm still interested in serving on the board. And my honest answer is that I have an incredibly deep belief in public education and its importance as the cornerstone of democracy and also for educating our citizenry. I also believe very strongly that education is the gateway to opportunity, and public education means that that gateway is open to everyone. So that's why I'm running, and I hope that my knowledge and experience is an asset to the district and the board, and hope I can continue to contribute.
Thank you, Nancy. Jennifer?
We are the ones we are waiting for. These are the words used to create positive change, captured in June Jordan's poetry. We are the ones we have been waiting for. As I sat to think thoughtfully about running for board, this phrase kept coming to my mind. A global pandemic, countless lives lost, crisis in our climate, increased suicide, war. These are the things that weigh on our young people's hearts. And these are the things that they're facing as they go into their adulthood. This is the reason I felt it was important to step forward, because if not us, then who? I believe education is the foundation of a healthy community. My experience brings not only policies that will create solutions for current challenges, but my training and professional focus on prevention will be critical in protecting our students' success. As a parent, I have a vested interest in preserving what makes our communities exceptional. In my nature, if I see something that our youth need, I step up for positive change. I listen and understand before I act. I move to collaborate and work towards others, towards actions that bring communities together. And I hope with all of you, want to fulfill our responsibilities to be the ones that we are waiting for, to move this district in progressing forward for every student, regardless of their intersectional identities. And I hope you help me with this vision. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. These are your candidates for school board. I want to thank you all for your participation in this forum and in helping us collectively make democracy work. Let's give them a round of applause. And one last pitch before we go. If you need any further information about candidates, voting, the statewide propositions, the local propositions, all that stuff, votersedge.org is the place to go. Nonpartisan, put on by the League of Women Voters of California and all the leagues up and down the state, and MapLight, which gives you information about who's funding the campaigns. So please check it out. Drive safely. Have a great evening.